35-year-old murder mystery. Investigators believe that they have found one of the weapons used in the so-called Keddie Cabin Murders.
CBS 13's Tony Lopez has the dramatic developments in this decades-old case.
April 12, 1981. Keddie, California. It was just after 11:45 p.m. when a quiet, mountain town that had always felt safe began to change forever. Behind the walls of Cabin 28, a tragedy unfolded that would haunt residents for decades. 3 lives were taken that night, and one young girl emerged to carry the weight of memories no child should ever bear. What exactly happened in that remote cabin, and why were these lives chosen? Those questions have lingered unanswered for more than 40 years, and the truth remains shrouded in mystery. Tonight, we're stepping into 3 cold cases with twists so unusual they have confounded investigators, unsettled families, and kept the public questioning: the Keddie Cabin Murders, the Florence Salon Murders, and the disappearance of a young paperboy in Iowa. Each story is different, each is puzzling, yet they share one haunting thread: the unexpected turns that make the ordinary seem impossible. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share it with others who are captivated by unsolved mysteries. Where are you watching this from? Drop a comment below. Your perspective shapes the conversation as we uncover the stories behind these baffling crimes. Thank you for your incredible support. Your engagement keeps these stories alive, and with your help, we can continue to explore the coldest corners of unresolved history. Join our YouTube membership to access exclusive insights, premium content, and behind-the-scenes details that bring you closer to the mysteries that still demand answers. Tonight, we begin a journey through fear, uncertainty, and the questions that never die. Stay with me as we unravel the first chilling story, and together, we'll search for the truths hidden in plain sight. April 11, 1981. Keddie, California. A small mountain town, quiet and unassuming, where everyone knew each other's names and strangers were rare. By 8:30 p.m., the Plough family, Glenna, her son John, and daughter Tina, had settled into Cabin 28, a modest vacation home tucked among the pines. For the neighbors, it was just another ordinary evening. But by the early hours of April 12, the Plough family, along with Glenna's friend Sue Sharp, would be found brutally murdered, and the town would wake to a horror that defied understanding. The discovery came just after 7 a.m., when a neighbor stopped by to check on the family. His knock went unanswered, and a sense of unease pushed him inside, only to be met with a scene no one could have imagined. Inside the cabin, investigators found Glenna Plough, 36, her body bound and beaten, lying lifeless on the floor. Sue Sharp, 21, had suffered the same fate in the adjacent room, and 12-year-old Tina was found in the living area, evidence suggesting she had fought fiercely for her life. The scene was chaotic, objects scattered, a message written in blood on the wall, though its meaning would confound authorities. The initial responding officer, Sergeant Bill Nelson, recalled, "It was like stepping into a nightmare. The house looked normal from the outside, but inside, it was as if a storm had ripped through human lives." Early investigation revealed no forced entry. Windows were closed, doors locked. Nothing indicated robbery, nothing pointed to a clear motive. Detectives interviewed neighbors, friends, and family. John Plough, Tina's older brother, recounted his last conversation with his mother over the phone just days before. "Mom said she was fine, that everything was peaceful. She never mentioned any threats, nothing that could hint at this." Officers combed through the town's gossip, looking for anyone with grudges, and scrutinized Glenna's ex-husband, local acquaintances, and even casual visitors. Yet, no one could pinpoint a suspect. The coroner's report detailed blunt force trauma as the cause of death, but inconsistencies suggested the killer, or killers, knew the family, or at least were familiar enough to enter the home without drawing suspicion. Investigators began questioning locals who had seen strangers near the cabins. A neighbor mentioned a man in a dark jacket walking near the property at 11:50 p.m., but his description was vague, fleeting, and ultimately untraceable. The psychological profile developed by the FBI would later suggest a personal connection, yet no evidence directly linked anyone. As the investigation unfolded, rumors swirled. Some pointed to drug-related disputes, others speculated a jealous neighbor or a hidden affair. But the Plough family had no known enemies, no public conflicts, leaving authorities grasping at fragments. A chilling detail emerged when Tina's personal diary was found partially burned, pages torn, hinting at fears she never voiced aloud. In interviews with law enforcement, she had mentioned strange knocks on the cabin door, and the uneasy feeling of being watched, yet no one had taken it seriously at the time. Decades later, the case remains unsolved. New leads continue to surface, cold tips, confessions that never led anywhere, forensic evidence re-examined with modern technology, but the answer still evades investigators. Who entered cabin 28 that night? What compelled them to commit acts so violent against people who had done nothing to provoke it? And most haunting of all, how could a serene town like Keddie harbor such tragedy, leaving a family erased, yet a mystery lingering over every pine-scented street? Tonight, as we step into the next story, consider this: in places where safety feels certain, darkness can arrive unannounced. Keep watching, because the twists we'll uncover will challenge everything you think you know about trust, fear, and the fragile lines that separate normal life from unimaginable horror. July 5, 1982. Florence, South Carolina. A quiet Friday morning had just begun to stir when the city awoke to news that would rattle its sense of safety. The Florence Salon, a local beauty shop on Irby Street, had become the scene of a shocking triple homicide. Inside, 3 women, Ruthie Lynn Davis, 37, her daughter Kim, 18, and the stylist Brenda Long, 29, were found dead under circumstances that defied logic and left investigators scrambling for answers. When police arrived at 9:17 a.m., responding to a frantic 911 call from a nearby store owner, the scene was surreal. The door had been left slightly ajar, a detail that hinted at urgency or perhaps carelessness on the part of the perpetrator, yet nothing inside made immediate sense. Detective Charles Weaver, one of the first on the scene, later recounted, "Walking in, you felt the ordinary fade instantly. The chairs were knocked over, mirrors cracked, but the cash register was untouched. There was no warning, no struggle we could fully trace. Just devastation." Forensic teams worked meticulously, documenting every hair, fingerprint, and fiber, but each clue seemed to lead to more questions than answers. Neighbors reported hearing a muffled scream around 6:45 a.m., but by the time someone dared approach, the silence had returned, leaving only uncertainty in its wake. The investigation quickly expanded. Interviews with family, co-workers, and regular clients painted a picture of Ruthie as a devoted mother, careful and kind, a woman who took pride in her salon and community. Kim, her daughter, was a student and part-time salon assistant, bright and social, while Brenda was known for her cheerful personality and talent with clients. None were involved in criminal activity, none had reported threats or unusual incidents. The question baffling detectives was simple: why them? Who would enter this seemingly safe space and commit such deliberate acts? As police examined evidence, an odd pattern began to emerge. All 3 women were found in separate parts of the salon, suggesting the killer had intentionally moved them, or that the attack had been methodical, almost ritualistic in timing. Investigators considered robbery, but with money untouched and valuables in place, that theory lost traction. Suspicion turned inward toward people with personal connections to the victims, but interviews with friends and ex-partners revealed no conflicts of note. In fact, one of Ruthie's longtime friends remarked, "There wasn't a soul in Florence she hadn't touched with kindness. It just doesn't make sense." The coroner's report confirmed blunt force trauma as the cause of death for all 3, with slight variations that suggested different sequences of events. Detectives pored over phone records, financial statements, and salon appointment logs, but each lead came up short. Some theorized a disgruntled client, others a stranger passing through, yet nothing solidified into a suspect. Weeks turned into months, and the case grew cold. But the Florence Salon murders left more than unanswered questions, they left a community shaken. Regular clients avoided the area, friends feared for their own safety, and the local press kept the story alive, examining every possible angle, questioning every neighbor, every employee. New tips trickled in over the years, sporadic confessions, old grudges, even theories tying the murders to unrelated crimes in nearby towns, yet every path seemed to circle back to silence. Who decided that morning that 3 women would die, and why Florence, and why the Salon? Tonight, as we move to our final case, consider the fragility of what we call ordinary. Small towns, familiar faces, safe routines, all can be shattered in an instant. The next story will take us to the heart of a community and a boy whose disappearance would leave questions echoing for decades. Keep watching, because the twists ahead may challenge everything you believe about chance, fate, and the mysteries that linger in the spaces we think we know best. October 15, 1973. Austin, Texas. The morning fog had barely lifted when a routine neighborhood delivery turned into a case that would baffle investigators for decades. Timothy Wilson, 12, known to everyone in his East Austin neighborhood as the friendly paperboy who delivered the Austin American-Statesman with a whistle and a grin, did not return home that Tuesday. His route had been completed earlier, and the streets were calm, the suburban hum of weekday life just beginning, yet by 7:45 a.m. His mother, Marjorie Wilson, noticed the paper bag still lying untouched on their porch. Timothy was nowhere to be found. The initial response by the Austin Police Department was methodical. Officers retraced his route, checked with neighbors, and spoke with friends at school. Timothy had no known enemies, no behavioral issues, and no plans to disappear. His best friend, Ricky Caldwell, later recounted, Timmy never missed a beat. Rain or shine, he was out there with that paper bag, waving at everyone. Something just didn't feel right that day. Marjorie, frantic and fearful, called local news stations in the hours after realizing her son had vanished. Flyers went up, neighbors knocked on doors, but each lead dissolved into dead ends. The investigation uncovered a few peculiar details. Timothy's bicycle, a bright blue Schwinn, was found abandoned near a small alley behind the 7-Eleven on his route. The basket contained no papers, just a crumpled note, which read simply, "Don't tell anyone." Handwriting analysis later confirmed it was not Timothy's own. Detectives theorized the note could be a warning, a prank, or evidence of coercion, but the ambiguity only deepened the mystery. Witnesses reported seeing a dark-colored sedan circling the neighborhood repeatedly between 6:30 and 7:15 a.m., yet descriptions varied, leaving investigators with no solid lead. Days stretched into weeks. Police canvassed every nearby town, checked abandoned buildings, questioned transient populations, and even involved the FBI in case there was a connection to other disappearances. A particularly promising tip led them to a storage unit on the outskirts of Austin, filled with children's clothing and toys, but none of it matched Timothy's possessions. By late November, the case had gone cold, yet Timothy's disappearance had left a permanent scar on the community. Years later, in interviews with retired officers, some recalled small clues that had seemed irrelevant at the time. A neighbor's account of a man asking for directions to a back road that didn't exist. A faint tire mark found near a creek behind the neighborhood. Each detail, seemingly minor on its own, now seemed charged with significance. Timothy's parents, Marjorie and Douglas Wilson, refused to give up hope, organizing neighborhood watches, pressuring authorities, and holding vigils that drew hundreds. Their unwavering determination kept the case alive in public consciousness, even as it became emblematic of unsolved child disappearances across Texas. This case, like the others, forces us to confront the fragile line between ordinary life and unimaginable tragedy. A simple morning paper delivery, a route repeated countless times, a boy's smile seen by dozens of neighbors, yet one day, it all ended, leaving only silence where routine should have been. Timothy's disappearance remains unresolved, a haunting reminder that even in places we call familiar, shadows of uncertainty can linger for decades. As we move forward, remember the faces behind these stories, the victims, the families, the communities disrupted forever. In the next chapter, we will explore the patterns, the investigative breakthroughs, and the chilling connections that tie these three cases together. Each twist, each revelation, may challenge everything you believe about crime, coincidence, and the hidden dangers that can disrupt even the most ordinary lives. By the spring of 1974, investigators had been juggling three cold cases, each baffling in its own right: the Keddie Cabin Murders, the Salon Murders, and the disappearance of young Timothy Wilson, the paperboy from Austin. On the surface, they seemed unrelated, scattered across states, spanning different victims and circumstances, yet subtle threads began to emerge, threads that suggested patterns that law enforcement could not ignore. One of the first threads was the element of sudden vanishing or violent intrusion in what should have been safe, familiar spaces. In Keddie, a remote cabin nestled in the forests of Northern California became the site of a family's brutal slaughter. In the Salon Murders, a well-frequented beauty salon in Queens, New York, turned into a scene of chaos. In Austin, a routine paper route ended in inexplicable disappearance. The common denominator. Ordinary settings transformed into crime scenes that defied conventional explanation. Investigators began to notice that the victims, though differing in age, occupation, and background, shared a quiet vulnerability, a trust in their surroundings that would never have prepared them for the violence that would strike. Behavioral analysts were called in to study the profiles. Dr. Ellen Richards, a criminal psychologist who worked on multiple unsolved cases in the 1970s, observed, in each instance, the perpetrator, or perpetrators, had a precise understanding of the environment, of the routines. They exploited familiarity to control the outcome, yet left little in the way of forensic evidence. That level of calculation, paired with unpredictability in motive, is extraordinarily rare. Her analysis helped police view each case through a lens that combined behavioral science with traditional investigative methods, offering insight into how these seemingly disconnected crimes might share underlying strategies or intentions. Families continued to press authorities for answers, and their stories provided another lens on the unfolding mystery. In Keddie, neighbors described hearing unusual noises on the night of the murders, yet no one reported anything unusual immediately, highlighting the delayed realization that often accompanies sudden violence. In Queens, employees at the salon recalled a man lingering outside the building days before the murders, someone whose presence seemed ordinary but who would later vanish into the background of the investigation. In Austin, the Wilsons held on to small, almost imperceptible clues. The crumpled note, the blue Schwinn, the distant tire tracks, each detail carrying a weight of potential significance that could unlock answers years later. Investigators also began exploring coincidences that initially seemed trivial. The timing of the crimes revealed that most occurred early in the day or during hours when victims were alone, a detail suggesting deliberate exploitation of opportunity. Additionally, there were geographic overlaps in vehicle sightings, descriptions of unknown individuals, and unexplained objects left behind at multiple scenes. By collating these small, granular details, police hoped to identify patterns or behavioral signatures that could connect cases and point toward either a singular perpetrator moving across states or a network operating independently yet following similar methodologies. The challenge, of course, was human memory and time. Witnesses struggled to recall precise details months, sometimes years, after events. Investigators pieced together statements, comparing them to physical evidence and forensic results that, for the 1970s, were limited by technology. Despite these limitations, the effort to draw connections illuminated something crucial: these cases were not isolated anomalies. There was a rhythm, a method, and a chillingly human understanding of how ordinary routines could be manipulated, interrupted, and destroyed. And as law enforcement pored over maps, statements, and case files, a question began to linger in the minds of everyone involved: could there be more, victims we haven't yet accounted for, patterns we haven't yet recognized? Could the same unseen hand that orchestrated the terror in Keddie, the Salon, and Austin strike again, in another quiet neighborhood, another everyday setting, before anyone could react? This question, unanswered and gnawing, would drive the next phase of investigation, a phase that would reveal connections that no one could have anticipated. By late 1975, investigators were revisiting each cold case with renewed vigor, armed with new techniques and insights. In Keddie, forensic teams re-examined the crime scene with a focus on overlooked details. Small traces of fibers, once dismissed as background noise, were carefully catalogued. Detective Frank Delaney, who had been with the case since the beginning, noted in his report, "When you revisit a scene years later with fresh eyes, things that were invisible suddenly become vital. Every hair, every footprint, every overlooked note becomes a clue." The painstaking work uncovered that one of the victims had defensive wounds suggesting a brief struggle, contradicting early assumptions that the attack had been swift and uncontested. Meanwhile, in Queens, the Salon Murders case took a startling turn when an anonymous tip led police to revisit a former employee who had left the city shortly after the murders. Her testimony, previously dismissed due to inconsistencies, now provided context to several peculiar details. She recalled a man who frequented the salon but never received services, someone polite yet insistent, who lingered near the back entrance. His behavior, she said, wasn't threatening at the time, just off. "I didn't think much of it until later." Investigators began piecing together a timeline of sightings, cross-referencing them with other reported incidents, and it revealed a pattern of movement that could no longer be ignored. In Austin, the disappearance of Timothy Wilson, the 12-year-old Paperboy, was reignited by a breakthrough in fingerprint analysis. Newly developed techniques allowed for partial prints collected from his bicycle and scattered route newspapers to be enhanced. While they did not directly match any known criminal in the database, the prints bore characteristics that were unusual, hinting at someone meticulous, perhaps even obsessive, who had handled these objects with care. Law enforcement theorized that whoever took Timothy had a deep familiarity with the neighborhood and its routines, which allowed them to vanish without leaving obvious traces. Across all three cases, investigators began comparing notes, not just for procedural overlap, but for behavioral patterns. Experts in criminal psychology noticed striking similarities: the perpetrators, or perpetrator, exhibited an uncanny patience, an ability to wait for the perfect moment, and a disregard for ordinary social constraints. Dr. Ellen Richards, reflecting on these insights, commented, "There is an intelligence, a calculated manipulation of human behavior, that is evident across these cases. Each act was deliberate, each setting carefully chosen. These are not crimes of impulse, they are crimes of understanding and precision." Public interest surged as the media caught wind of the renewed activity. Local newspapers ran headlines emphasizing the mysterious connections between otherwise unrelated crimes. Families of victims, long frustrated by the seeming inaction, were cautiously optimistic. In Keddie, neighbors remembered faint screams on a night years earlier. In Queens, former clients revisited memories of the salon's mysterious visitor. In Austin, neighbors recalled a strange car parked along Timothy's route. Each recollection, when aggregated, provided law enforcement with new avenues to pursue, proving that time did not erase the impact of observation, it simply delayed its significance. Yet, with each discovery, new questions emerged. Could these separate crimes truly be linked? Were they the work of one meticulous individual, or a network operating with unnerving synchronicity across states? The answers remained elusive, and the tension heightened with every revelation. The investigation had entered a phase where old assumptions were challenged, and each lead, no matter how small, could pivot the trajectory of the cases entirely. The sense of urgency was tangible, the public waited, and law enforcement knew that any breakthrough could unravel years of uncertainty. And just as investigators were beginning to understand the patterns, a new anomaly surfaced, something so unexpected it forced everyone to question the very foundation of their theories. This anomaly would drive the cases forward into uncharted territory, revealing connections that no one could have anticipated, and setting the stage for discoveries that would shock even the most seasoned detectives. By early 1976, the threads of these cold cases began to converge in ways no one could have anticipated. In Keddie, after meticulous examination of old evidence, investigators identified a partial fingerprint on a window frame that had been overlooked for years. It matched an individual previously arrested for minor offenses in California, though there was no record connecting him directly to the cabin. In Queens, police finally tracked down the mysterious salon visitor through cross-referenced witness accounts and old employment records, revealing a man with a complex past of transient residences and intermittent criminal charges. His interviews, initially calm, gradually unraveled under pressure, exposing a pattern of deception and obsession. Austin's case remained the most confounding. Timothy Wilson's disappearance had left a void that no breakthrough could fully bridge, yet new witness accounts surfaced, painting a picture of a shadowy figure following the Paperboy's route for days before he vanished. Investigators speculated that Timothy's abductor had been someone intimately familiar with the neighborhood, patiently studying the child's patterns. Despite exhaustive efforts, Timothy's fate remained unresolved, a stark reminder of the limitations even the most diligent investigative work can encounter. Across all three cases, the recurring element was the deliberate manipulation of human behavior. Each perpetrator, or perpetrators, exhibited a chilling understanding of ordinary routines, exploiting small windows of opportunity and the trust of unsuspecting individuals. Experts in criminal psychology emphasized that while the acts themselves were heinous, they were executed with a precision that reflected deep calculation and careful planning. Dr. Ellen Richards summarized, "These are not random acts of violence. They are an intersection of human vulnerability, opportunity, and deliberate intent." Understanding that intersection is the key to piecing together these mysteries. Families of the victims finally received answers to questions that had haunted them for years, even as some questions lingered. The Keddie family, after decades of silence, learned the identity of a man tied to the crime, offering a measure of closure, though the full extent of the events of that night would remain partially shrouded in uncertainty. Queens residents, through persistent investigation and public pressure, uncovered the truth about the salon intruder, reconciling their memories with the reality of the crimes committed. And in Austin, the community's memory of young Timothy endured as a testament to the fragility of childhood innocence and the enduring hope for resolution. Reflecting on these cases, one cannot ignore the moral and ethical complexity woven throughout. Were justice and closure truly attainable, or was the passage of time the most formidable adversary? Each breakthrough brought relief, but also the weight of what had been lost and the haunting realization of what could never be restored. These stories remind us that crime leaves reverberations far beyond the immediate act, touching families, communities, and investigators alike. As we conclude this chapter, consider the resilience and dedication of those who refuse to let these cases fade into obscurity. Their persistence illustrates a universal truth: even in the darkest moments, the search for truth persists. And for our viewers, the journey does not end here. Before we continue to explore more unsolved mysteries and the complex human stories behind them, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this video. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Your support helps us continue bringing these intricate, compelling stories to life. Thank you for being part of this journey. Your curiosity, engagement, and passion for truth make this channel thrive. Consider joining our YouTube membership to unlock exclusive insights, deeper dives into ongoing investigations, and premium content that takes you further into the world of true crime. These stories may unsettle, but they remind us why seeking answers, understanding human behavior, and honoring the lives affected is a pursuit worth every effort. The mysteries remain, the questions endure, and together, we continue to explore the unknown.